This is R4E, the Reason for Everything podcast with Arjan Peters. I'm your host, Arjan. In this episode, I sat down with Dr. Ruchi Gupta. Dr. Gupta is a professor of pediatrics and medicine at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine and is a clinical attending at Ann and Robert H. Lurie's Children's Hospital of Chicago. She currently serves as the founding director of the Center for Food Allergy and Asthma Research and is the co-founder of Yobee. In this episode, we discuss her journey through med school, her research and work surrounding pediatric food allergy and asthma, founding a scalp and skin probiotic startup, and more. Enjoy this episode of R4E. Let's dive in. Hi, Dr. Gupta. How are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join the podcast today.
Oh, it's my honor. I'm excited about this.
I'm excited as well. Are you calling in from Chicago today, or where are you right now?
Yes, I am at home in Chicago.
Fantastic. I know you're on the road a bunch. The last time we saw each other was in Las Vegas at the health conference, which was amazing and chaotic at the same time, as I feel like most people's experiences in Vegas are. But I'd love to kind of dive into your world, what you've been up to, and before we do that, you picked the song. "Someone to You" by Banners. What does that song mean to you? I know you had a last minute selection there, but what does that song mean to you? Why is it an important walk-up song to you?
I think, we're all looking, to make a difference, and more than, anything for yourself, it's all about, impacting people's lives in a positive way. And I think that's a lot of what this song talks about, just
Absolutely.
basically wanting to be someone to somebody, right? And not necessarily in an egotistical way or anything, but like more in a, what can we do to make the world a better place for people? So, and it's a fun song. It's pretty lively. So it's Absolutely. Fun to dance to.
Absolutely. And I know your work every single day is an effort to make my life better. We'll dive into the why behind that in a little bit here, but maybe to get everyone up to speed who hasn't had the chance to see your work, hear about you, could you maybe give the audience a quick 30 second primer on who you are?
Who I am? Oh my gosh. Okay. It's so interesting because I learned recently about the golden circle. Do you know what the golden circle is?
I'm not familiar.
All right. Well, so here we go. We're going to dive right in. So it's like 3 circles, right? And the outside one is what, and the next one is how, and then the final one is why, right? Mm-hmm. The middle one. But what I learned is most people, when they tell their story, don't talk about the why as much, and it's the what. So I know you're going to get to the why, but what I am, or my titles. So I'm professor of pediatrics at Northwestern and Lurie Children's, and I'm the director of the Center for Food Allergy and Asthma Research there. So I'm a pediatrician, a scientist, researcher, and I guess an author and an entrepreneur and a mom. So those are all my formal titles. So
absolutely. It's and that doesn't even do any sort of justice for all that you do. And I'm excited to jump into it.
Yeah.
Was that the Simon Sinek TED Talk where he compared Apple to Dell, the what, how, why? Or I'm not sure if that was where you heard the
yeah. I don't know. I mean, but that would make sense. I agree.
Yeah, that's a really interesting framework. But like I said, that quick description of who you are doesn't do anywhere near justice for your impressive resume. So maybe we start with, did you grow up in Chicago? I know you're there now, but where'd you grow up?
Louisville, Kentucky.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, not many people expect that. So yes, grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, came to the US when I was 2. Immigrant parents they got jobs in Louisville, Kentucky, and that's where I ended up spending, all of my childhood, and then ended up in undergrad and med school there, in one of those guaranteed med programs, being the good daughter and going to med school like I was told. So yes, that's where I started my life.
And then did you do your fellowship and residency in Kentucky as well, or where did you end up going for those programs?
No, I definitely left. So Louisville's a great place, but I think it's important to explore and get out and see the world as much as you can when you can. So after medical school, in between 2, I would go. I went to Australia for a rotation for a couple months and Boston, but after medical school, went to Seattle for residency, and then Boston for fellowship, and got my master's in public health there, and did a research fellowship, and then ended up in Chicago after that for my first job, and have been here for 18 years now.
Terrific. So you went from Louisville, Kentucky to areas being Seattle, Boston, Chicago that are traditionally cold and snowy and or rainy for a lot of the year. What was the transition like, leaving home, going elsewhere in a completely different environment? What was that like for you as you were going through busy times in school, through residency, what have you?
I mean, it was great.
Yeah.
And I have to say, like, I don't know if I'll ever live in Seattle again. It's out there in the corner, but beautiful, and mountains, and just gorgeous. Totally different environment. And the program I went to in Seattle was pretty phenomenal. It's a very, very busy pediatric program, and they cover 4 states or 5 states, I don't know, over there. So it's not like Chicago, where we have a lot of big universities and big children's hospitals. It was like the only one. So you get really, really great training. And the other thing they're really big in is research, and specifically kind of public health or outcomes research, kind of the stuff I do, policy research, advocacy, all of that was really strongly emphasized there. And I think that's where I got the bug, that I could do that. Because before that, I wanted to be a doctor, wanted to be a pediatrician, take care of kids, which I still do, but learning the power of public health research. I'd done basic science research, which is, I did not enjoy. I remember every Monday we had to go and take eyes out of a rabbit, and I would get so sick, and I was like, this is the most horrible thing in the world. So I'm not good at animal research and that whole world. And so I pretty much canceled research. I'm like, I'm not doing this until I got to residency. So that was kind of one of those points that you talk about it. If I didn't get that mentorship and exposure to learn that there was this whole other side of research where you could, look at trends and look at prevalence and look at a lot of these big things, understanding, how things happen in society, and then take that to change policy. That was something I learned in Seattle.
Absolutely. When you uncovered that whole new realm of research, did you know in the moment that this door and kingdom for you was unlocked, or was it something that you gradually realized over time and looking back, or was it something in the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting to watch, when you have mentors who would talk about their research and how it actually influenced some new health policies, and but no, I don't think you ever know in the moment. I think it's one of those things where you kind of get excited about something and pursue it, follow it and see where it leads. And sometimes those things you're like, nah, never mind. And sometimes you're like, this is it, this is something I want to try. And one thing I learned is, try it, because it's okay. Nothing is really permanent, right? Like the jobs you have, and you can pivot and you can move around, and there's other things you can do. And I think a lot of times when you're young, you think, okay, this is going to be my job and I got to just go in this direction. And if anything goes off track, then, oh no, but it's not always that way. So research was something then looked interesting. And that's when we moved to Boston, and that whole next chapter started.
Got it. As a quick branch there, was pediatrics always your calling in the medical field, or were you ever looking at any other specialty?
That's actually a really great question. How do you know? And I remember when I was in med school, I liked everything, like so much. I loved surgery, and I really enjoyed pretty much every rotation I went through. I went into med school thinking I wanted to go into ophthalmology. And then the reason I chose not to, I'd done all this basic science ophthalmology research, was because I wanted continuity. I thought I liked seeing the patient back over and over. So then I was like, okay, maybe a primary care, but I love doing surgery. So, I got really confused. Some people straight up know, but I was not one of those. So every single one, I'm like, oh, maybe I want to do this. Maybe I want to do this. But in the end, you have to pick, and so for me, it was kind of like flipping a coin. I was like, I really like pediatric hospitals. They're bright and fun. Yeah. And I love kids and taking care of them. But it's not like I absolutely knew. And I think that's another really important point. I think I would have been just as happy if I would have picked one or the other areas. My life would have taken a different turn, but I may have ended up in the same general space I am now and dealing with another disease. So it's, again, it wasn't end all be all. It was just a decision you make that takes you down a path.
Absolutely. And I'm sure it was validating not going into eye care after your dissection of the rabbit eyes every Monday.
Oh my gosh. Oh, poor rabbits.
And this might be my own naivety, but at what point did you kind of hone into allergy, asthma, immunology research? At what point does that happen in the med
story? No, that I had no interest in that for a long time. That comes later. Yeah. So then I went to Boston. I was really fortunate. I was married I got married during residency and then moved to Boston. My husband got his fellowship there. And so I was looking for something to do. And I was fortunate enough to get a couple of offers for these fellowship programs. And they were research fellowships, health services research fellowships. And you would get your master's in public health along with it. So I ended up at Boston Children's and the Harvard School of Public Health. And I mean, I totally felt like an imposter. Like, what am I doing here? This little girl from Louisville. And it was really scary because I, was with these incredible group of people trying to change the world. And it was very eye-opening, to just learn and be there in an environment where there was so much going on. So that was really impactful. And then we had our son while I was in fellowship. So it was also really, really crazy, really crazy, and a lot of juggling. And I wanted to go into childcare research. And it's really interesting because you see what impacts your life. So at that point, he was in a daycare center. And every time I went, they'd ask me questions about the other kids and if this looked serious and look at this rash. And I'm like, they need more help. And then my son had like a breath holding spell, turned blue. They called 911 and nobody told me. And they're like, well, we didn't know what's going on. So I'm like, there needs to be more help resources in these childcare centers. So actually that was my first paper in pediatrics. And that's what I thought I'd go into. So again, pivoting. And I guess my most interesting story in Boston is, by the time I started getting over my imposter syndrome, I thought I was doing a good job. I was really excited, started feeling like I belonged there, and then was looking for a job. And our peds was hiring. They were hiring a research junior faculty. And so I was super psyched. I'm like, oh, could I really be a Harvard faculty? And so I went to the director and, excitedly walked into her office and sat down. And I was like, hey, I don't know if I missed a memo or anything, but I just wanted you to know that I'm really interested in this position and I would love to stay here. And I remember she turned to me and pretty much said, Ruchi, I didn't invite you to interview for this position. I was like, well, that's obvious. That's why I'm here. And she said, she's like, I just don't think you have what it takes to be a researcher.
Wow.
And I just don't think you have the skill set. I think you'd be great at many things, but I don't think research is it for you. And so I didn't offer you an interview. So, so that was fun. So kind of knocked me down and totally gave me my imposter syndrome back. Kind of ran out of there and not tears yet, but by the time I got to my office and really threw me for a loop, like, what have I been doing? And, you're juggling and trying to balance it all and being productive. And now the head of your program doesn't even think this is for you. So I guess my thing with that, like these big moments in your life, they mean a lot, right? And you've got these really big people telling you what you can or can't, or what they think, and I don't know. I think in the end, it's what you think and what you believe. And so, I'd like to tell these stories because I think when you get like what you said about me in the beginning, you wouldn't guess that, right? You wouldn't guess that somebody in your life pretty much almost kicked you out of this field because you just didn't have the skills. So, yeah.
Unbelievable. Do you I mean, spoiler alert for everyone who's going to listen to the rest of this episode. Dr. Gupta is obviously an unbelievable researcher. Have you been in contact with that, the head of that program at all since, or do you ever think about, do you have her in the back of your head as like a motivator still, or have you moved past that at this point in your career?
Yeah, that's so funny you asked that. No, I haven't. But so many people in the audience have guessed who it is. Like, I've told this story too. But no, I do think it was very, very hurtful at that point. And I wouldn't recommend anyone do that to their mentees. But it was motivational. At the time, I wasn't in this position of, well, I'll show you. It was almost okay, what do I do now? Because I just did this whole fellowship.
Yeah.
Now do I throw it away, or do I, try it out? And in my mind for a long time, it's like, well, this isn't going to work out. But since I put all this time and effort into it, I should at least try, And so it's hard. You want to say, well, I'll show you, you just watch me. But, it's the person who trained you is telling you, like, you don't have what it takes. It's not easy to jump back. But what ended up happening is I applied for jobs, because I was well trained and I was still very passionate about this area. And then, the other area. So when you're in research, you kind of have to pick a space, right? So if I want to do general health and childcare research, no one's going to take you because the NIH is very divided into different programs. So I had to kind of pick, like, what do I want to focus on? So the other area that was really interesting to me was asthma, because in the hospital, and when you work in a peds hospital, it's the number one reason people come in to the ER, and number one reason they get hospitalized. It's one of the most common chronic conditions. And one thing that really bothered me was all the disparities around it. You would definitely see underserved, low-income kids coming in with asthma exacerbations and spending time in the hospital longer. And, just are they not accessing their meds? Are they not able to take it? Are we doing something wrong? So I ended up being very fortunate in getting a position in Chicago at Northwestern and Lurie Children's to work with one of the world leaders in asthma disparities. Wow. And so that's that. And I was like, okay, here we go. All right, I'll do my best and let's see what happens. And yeah, that was 2004. Okay. Here to Chicago. I'm telling you my age here. Huh?
And what was that like for you? Because you had a young family at the time, to obviously two different folks in the medical field. What was that like picking up and leaving from Boston at that stage of your career, at that stage of your all lives together?
Yeah, I mean, that's another really big challenge, like two academic careers, and where do you go and how do you find two positions that are good for both of you? Right. And where in the country do you go? And we didn't have family in Boston. We didn't have family in Chicago. And yeah, we both had, big dreams. So it was super challenging because, there were some places, he liked, but I couldn't. There was nothing for me. There were some places I liked, but there was nothing for him. Chicago was a city big enough that there were positions for both of us. But he did have to sacrifice. I got a really, kind of my dream job, and he got a great job, but it wasn't as good as some of the others. Right. So somebody's got to, and I'm very fortunate. He's like the most supportive person in the world. And I think that's another big thing. You got to support each other, push each other. And yeah. And so we ended up in Chicago, 2 academic positions and a 2-year-old. So that too is a bit of a juggle, but it was great because Chicago is more affordable, and now we had jobs. So we weren't poor, starving residents anymore, which was a good thing. But moving to Chicago was great. Chicago is an amazing city. And our, the positions and the hospitals were so supportive and so wonderful.
Absolutely. And so you're getting your official career started, I guess, at that point. Obviously, you'd been working for a while before then, but what was that like for you? You had found your dream job. Was it everything you thought it was going to be? Were there challenges or surprises along the way as you were getting started in this new role?
Yeah. I feel like I'm going to tell you all my failures, but I think it's a good thing. So I get to Chicago, and I start working. And it's pretty intense, right? Because you want to do well. And then had my 2-year-old. Now, remember, I'm a pediatrician researcher, and I knew if this, if my old boss was right and this research thing didn't work out, I could still be a pediatrician, right?
Okay.
So here I am, and then, I have to take my boards. So I'm studying for my pediatric boards when I get to Chicago, along with starting a new job and my 2-year-old. And just guess what happens?
I'm not sure. You tell me. I don't know where this is going to go.
Say it. You failed. So after all this time in medicine and passing like 1 million exams, I fail my pediatric boards. And now here someone told me I can't be a researcher. Now someone's telling me I can't be a pediatrician. So I'm like, okay. So it was a pretty low point in my life. But again, like, what do you do at times like that? You work your whole career for these things, and then, these things happen. And so all you can do is kind of dust yourself off and get up. Like, there's no other choice, really. I'm not going to quit all these careers and walk away. So, but you do wonder. You're like, wow, did I tell you when I was little I wanted to be an actress?
No.
Darn it, I should have just stuck with playing a doctor on TV. So you're like, oh man, darn, can't be an actress if you're, an Indian daughter. So anyway, all joking aside, I ended up just paying more attention to it. And now next time, did what I needed to do and studied harder. You kind of think by then that you don't really need to study because you've passed 100 tests by then, but you do. So I did pass. So I am a pediatrician. I am a board certified pediatrician. And then I just started chugging along. And this is the answer to your old question. How did I get into food allergy research? So here I am in Chicago, and I met a family, a couple who had 2 young kids with food allergy. And I didn't really know much about food allergies. Again, this is like 2005. So it wasn't a big deal. You heard about peanut allergies and anaphylaxis and things happening, but it wasn't a prominent issue. So I met them, and they were so passionate and so focused on, we need more research in this space, that I went home and did my homework and noticed that, like, we knew nothing about food allergies, and I was in asthma, and the amount we knew about asthma, food allergies was nowhere. So I'm like, oh, this could be a space where I could help, right? Like I just have this new skill set, and could I put it to use? And so that's what started me. This was around 2004, 2005. So I realized we didn't even know how many kids had food allergy. So we didn't know prevalence. So I'm like, okay, I know how to do that. I know how to do large, national studies, and I will, put my skills to work. And so, some of the first studies we did was the first prevalence study in kids of food allergies. And
Wow.
that, that's kind of where my passion came from. It came from another family that I just randomly met, so it could come from anywhere, right? You just never. So I guess another pearl is, just keep your eyes open, have conversations, see, just like in the beginning, see what feels right and follow your intuition. Yeah.
That's a common theme in these conversations that I've had, is listening to your gut and following your intuition. It's interesting. I'm curious if you ever think back or play back the scenarios if you hadn't run into that family or hadn't had that conversation. Just, again, a lot of other trajectories for your life and career, but that would have been great. But it's crazy to think that of how important and impactful your life on food allergies and asthma has been because of a random conversation you had.
Yeah, that's so true. It is. And, I still know them so well.
I was going to ask, do you keep in touch with them?
Oh, yes, a ton. And they're still just as wonderful. And their kids are all grown up and, super successful and doing great, and still have food allergies, and one has EOE and still challenged, but there's new treatments and they're doing well on those, So, but the ironic part of my life is 2 years into it. My daughter was born in 2006. So 2 years into it, or 3 years, 2007, I'm still studying food allergies. And my daughter is like around 1, and my son's eating his PB&J and playing with her and touches her and probably gets a little in her mouth. And she breaks out in hives and starts vomiting. And lo and behold, here I am, a pediatrician food allergy researcher, and now my daughter is having an anaphylactic episode. And now I am a mom of a child with food allergies. So it is kind of wild how life happens sometimes. So it became my everything, right? It became my life at home. It became my life at work. And it definitely taught me so much, because as a researcher and a pediatrician, you see it, but then when you have to live it too, it gives you a whole new perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's a good way to transition to your work today and all that you've done since 2007 when that episode happened, from your work with the seed study, CFAAR, to even Yobee Care. What's that whole kind of process transition been like in any direction you want to take this? But you had this kind of reignited passion. Obviously, you were very invested in the food allergy space for a while, and then that happens. There's to your point, a whole new world. It's your everything now.
Yeah.
What's that? How do you channel all that energy? How do you go from there?
Yeah. How do you go from there? So now I have a newly diagnosed food allergic daughter, and I have a son who doesn't have food allergies. And it's really fascinating to watch how they both grow up and the impact food allergy has on everyday life. And so I guess my career I really wanted to study the public health impact. And then I started studying, we found that 8% of kids have food allergy, and we named what the top 9 now food allergies are and how severe they are. But then I really wanted to get out into the public things like quality of life, and knowledge and attitudes and awareness. And so we moved into that kind of research, and then we moved into school research, because it's almost like every phase I would get into, like, oh my God, this is such an issue, right? Like, how do you navigate school? And I'm like, well, is there any data on it? Are there any policies around it? So we did a lot of school research. What was really hard was in Chicago, a little girl who was in 8th grade was at school and had some Chinese food for a holiday party, had an anaphylactic episode, no epinephrine, and she passed away. Wow. And when this happened, Chicago Public Schools, it was in the Chicago Public Schools, and it was so devastating, right? Like no one had seen this, and everyone came together. And I was so grateful to be a part of that team to see what can we do, right? Like to make sure this never, ever happens again, and to support her memory. And so we worked together to develop a policy in CPS. It was the largest school district to say, we're going to have epinephrine auto-injectors in every school in the Chicago Public Schools. And that got passed. And I said, can I write papers off of it with you? Can we publish all of this? So we published papers on the policy, on how it was working, on what it was doing. And all of those papers were then used for the bill that Obama signed, saying that schools should have policies around stock epinephrine. And so, that was, a really big deal for me. And I learned the power of research and potentially changing policies to support any conditions. But for me, food allergies and supporting families and kids with food allergies. So, everything was intertwined, and it just kind of went along together. So we did that. And then we kept moving forward. And then it was like issues about labeling. How challenging is labeling and precautionary allergen labeling? And so we wrote multiple papers off that. And now we're trying to get that changed, right? Because, kids with food allergies, if they're not eating anything with precautionary allergen labels, their food is so limited. They're packaged goods. It makes life so challenging. And so how do we make that better? Things like, when we did all the prevalence studies, we published on sesame being the 9th allergen, and that went into the Fast Track, which now sesame has to be labeled. So, I think I really started getting into what are the needs and what data do we have to produce to help support it. So yeah, that became a really big focus of mine, and it continues to be.
Well, it's an amazing marriage of your skill set and technical expertise as a practitioner, and then also your interest in research, and then obviously to your point earlier, having it at home too. It's all encompassing for you. So that kind of blend and braid of all the things that you care about being your day-to-day at your desk at work, or metaphorical desk, if you will, and then back at home too. It's just, like I said, it's probably a perfect funnel for channeling all that energy for change.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of my biggest joys, and, if anyone watching ever has any interest, is I love learning, because I love learning from people, not just other physicians and researchers, but from the public, because a lot of our ideas came from what people told us they needed, so, we really, there's not enough, a lot of the school stuff for sure. But then, someone came to me after we did all the school stuff, this amazing woman who said, that's great, you're doing all the school stuff, but, there's a big hole in early childcare. Nobody knows anything there. And so I was like, okay, join me, let's figure it out, and so she was an early childhood educator, and started working in that space, and now developed these amazing training tools that we want to push out to all childcare centers to help support them. Then people came and said, hey, this is super cool, but there's nothing in colleges. And colleges is when, students become completely independent on their own, and they don't want to talk about their food allergy because they want to make friends and be accepted. And so I was like, oh, okay, let's work together and do it. So we work with a ton of college students to help develop, college resources. So, I love when individuals have these ideas and they want to make change. And I love being a support for helping make that happen.
And how do you stay focused, or I guess allocate your time, stay balanced, and keep track of all your things across these different streams of work or project or side projects that become full-time endeavors? How do you, I know you have a great team working with you, obviously, but how do you personally manage that on top of being a mother and managing your family time and everything like that as well?
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely a juggle. It always has been. But like you said, I mean, I think one of the biggest things is it's not just me, right? And that's why it's like, oh, you're doing so much. It's not me doing so much, right? I think the biggest secret I learned early on is find teams, and find your group, that all is passionate about the same thing and moving in the same direction. So at CFAAR, the Center for Food Allergy and Asthma Research, we have an incredible team. And it started with me and one person, and then you grow and you grow, and it snowballs and snowballs. And now we have like 60, and we have 8 faculty, and they're all just incredible people. And, I think another big thing is don't be type A, I have to do everything myself. Like, spread it out. Like, I work so closely with a couple PhDs, and they are brilliant, and they have skills I don't have, and then I have skills they don't have. And so how do you bring people together with different skill sets, all after the same goal, and you combine, and, you can do anything. So we have incredible people on our team, and then so many great project managers and the research assistants, and everybody working towards the same goal. So I often feel bad because I feel like I get a lot of the credit, although it's not me. It's a big us, for everything you do in life.
Of course. Now, out of obviously your current team at Yobee Care is unique. Out of your work you've done before, probably interesting, again, balance of family time and work. This is a literal marriage of the two, right? How did that project come to be this amazing startup that it is today?
Yeah, it's a really cool story. So I'm so academic researcher, and never thought of myself as a business entrepreneur type at all. And so when my daughter was born, she had eczema and cradle cap, and, again, backs into my research, the whole idea of eczema being the number one risk factor to develop food allergies, right? So a lot of the work we do now, as you know, is in prevention. So the idea of early introduction So another funny story, no more failures. I won't go there, even though I can, if you guys like to hear that, but I want to make this like, no, let's uplift now. But I had my daughter. She developed peanut allergy. I never introduced peanut to her because back then the rule was don't eat peanuts till age 3. So New York Times was doing a writing up on the LEAP study and asked me, my opinion of it. And then I told him I had a daughter with food allergies. And the last piece of that is Dr. Gupta is slapping herself on the wrist for not introducing peanut to her daughter. Of course she was 1. And I'm like, mom guilt is so prevalent, but mine was just exposed all over New York Times. So anyway, it really got me into, now we have a solution. And yeah, I do regret it, but I didn't know it. But how do we make sure everybody else knows it, right? And how do we figure out how to prevent? So now some of our largest studies are around prevention. So even though my daughter developed it, can we, now that we have prevention, avoid it for everyone else? So that's a big thing for me to try to push out. So that's where the SEED study and all that comes from. So now back to when she was a baby with the cradle cap and eczema, as a pediatrician and researcher, it's so frustrating, right? Because this is what you do and you can't fix it. And so tried all kinds of stuff on her because there's got to be a better solution. We figured it out. We did find something, and it was a combination of kind of probiotics and natural ingredients like honey and turmeric, anti-inflammatories. And it worked so well on her scalp that her cradle cap never came back. And then again, on her skin, that her eczema got tremendously better. So then, being a researcher and pediatrician, I just gave it away in clinic for 10 years. I just would tell all my residents, we'd write down the recipe, we'd give it away to people. And then Northwestern has an innovations lab, and they were asking if any faculties had ideas. And I was like, I have an idea. It's a really good one. And so we went to them and they were really excited about it. And so they helped us patent it. And then we did a clinical trial looking at adults with dandruff. So it's not just for babies. It started that way, but works so well in adults with dry scalp and dandruff. And so we created a product line, which I'm so excited to talk to you today because we just launched like 2 days ago. And so we finally, after she's 16 now. So after 15 years, this product that worked on her that long ago is now out there and available for adults, kids, babies, everyone. So that's how Yobee Care started. And it's kind of cool. And so back to the pivoting, like it's kind of fun to, once you like figure something out. So now, yes, I do think I'm a researcher. I know research, but now I'm a mentee. I have mentors in this world of business and entrepreneurship, and now my learning curve is so steep, and it's so fun to just learn again, and try to master this new world of business, which I know nothing about. And it's so exciting because, for a long time, you think research and industry are separate, like, oh no, industry are the bad guys and, the academics are the good guys. But what you soon learn is we wouldn't have anything without industry, right? That's where all the treatments come from. That's where all the products come from. And that's how you get things to people, So learning that there should be more of a connection there, and more faculty who have ideas should try to get it out, to the public to use, has been really interesting. So, and a lot of fun.
I believe it. I mean, to your point about learning curve, even just trying to get this podcast started, which is nowhere near having to deal with clinical trials or patent approval or anything to that effect. But that was a learning curve for myself here, but I can't imagine what that was like in your shoes. So you mentioned the entrepreneurial learning curve. How have you been able to attack that learning curve, get up to speed, shift maybe from the academic researcher to the commercial entrepreneur? What's that transition balance? I mean, obviously you're still balancing, but what's that kind of new unlock been like for you?
Just super cool. I watch a lot of Shark Tank. I read a lot of articles. I do have a couple great mentors who help support us. All my friends that are in business, I pick their brains all the time. And I've gotten into some programs, like I'm in this Found Her fellowship at Northwestern where they teach us a lot. It has been so much fun because just like I said, like keep reinventing, like I'm so excited about your podcast because this isn't easy. Like it is challenging. I mean, you make it sound, like, oh, just this podcast, but to build out a podcast and do it right is not easy. And to get people who you think would be entertaining or interesting on there that people want to listen to, like the whole thing is really, it's work. And but if you enjoy it, then it's not really work, right? And so I always say that I'm enjoying the journey. There's so many challenges because even now I'm like, wow, now I'm like on the other side, right? Like all these industry people would come to me and now I'm telling people, hey, I have a product, I think you would like it. You should try it. And it feels so weird because you're not used to selling anything and you never want to be in that. Like I never thought I would be oh, please buy my, please try it. So it's a whole different world, but it's so good for you or for me, I think, to see it from all these angles, right? Because now you're sitting in a different seat. And you're sitting in a seat where you've seen other people who come to you sit. And it's just such a overall just a phenomenal experience. And you're a mentee again. You're just like this junior person who doesn't know what they're doing, who's trying to learn and doesn't know the mnemonics. And yeah, so I kind of feel like a med student again, but it's awesome to be in this position.
That's just great to hear. And it's exciting to hear that the product is launched. I know I had a sneak preview of it and it was terrific. I'll be sure to plug all of the links to it in the show notes and show description. I guess as we round out here, I'd be curious, any last kind of words of parting advice you'd give to the audience, any goals or aspirations you'd share for next steps for Yobee Care, your research, or just as a pediatrician, where your head's at as we're rounding out into 2023, almost already in April now. So we'll just love any maybe closing thoughts you might have in the last couple of minutes here.
Sure. Yeah. My goodness. I mean, I would say for everyone, if there's anything that you really want to do, please just give it a shot. Like it's so, and if it's not in your realm, if it is in your realm, be a learner again. Like it's so fun to move from master of something to a novice, and to pivot and keep growing. I think growth is essential and it keeps everything fun. And so, your job, like juggling all this, it's not a job. It's fun. It's busy, but as long as you're enjoying it. So just keep listening to yourself. Like if you're not enjoying it, if it's hard to wake up in the morning and go do that, it's probably not a good thing to do. I mean, and not that every day is going to be a party, but I mean, there are really hard things that you have to deal with in any position. But if overall, you're excited about it. And then just, your keep your intentions true, right? Like your end goal, what is it? And so for me, for CFAAR, like I said, it's how can I make positive change in the world? And that's what I try to teach, right? Like how can we make things better? And frequent ego checks, like, oh, I'm doing this for my own, fame. No, I'm doing this to make things better. Yes. And same with business. Like, am I doing this for money? No. If your lifestyle is our lifestyle, there's not much more I even have time to do. So if we end up doing well, all this money is going back to doing good, and giving away. So, and the pure, like the intention is to get something that, is something good and useful to people who may need it. Right. And so keep your intentions pure, lots of ego checks because ego gets in the way all the time. And definitely follow your intuition. If things aren't fun anymore, then maybe that's the push to, okay, what else is out there? And keep connecting with people, keep talking to people, because you never know when an idea or something's going to come up that kind of gives you that inspiration that you're looking.
I couldn't agree more with all of that. It's interesting. You mentioned earlier the golden circles or golden triangle with the what, the how, the why. Yeah. And we started with the what, and then the why for you now is your passion for this mission, both in the home and outside in your day-to-day research. And so it really is a kind of a full circle for you and rounding that out there. So yeah, I want to truly express my gratitude for your time and your busy schedule. For anyone listening, that if that's not clear enough, Dr. Gupta is incredibly busy. So thank you so much for giving some of your time for the audience here. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again in person soon and having you back on the podcast in the future.
That's awesome. And congratulations to you and best of luck, Arjan. I'm so excited for your podcast and all the success in the world and good stuff.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate it.